used. Oh, there. Hi. Test S. Hopefully people can hear me now. I didn't realize I was muted. Excellent. Well, I'm not going to go backwards. Let's just go forwards. Tiana already talked a little bit about OWASP. I've been a big supporter of OWASP for a long, long time. Let's talk privacy. So there's kind of, I guess, 6 different opinions on internet privacy. You have the philosopher. Privacy is an impractical way to think about data in a digital world. Blah, 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 boring, right? You have the crypto nut, where he's like, my data is safe behind 6 layers of symmetric and public key algorithms. And then they say, what day is this? And he's like, me emailing people about cryptography. This is so much fun. Let's try this again. I am sharing. All right. We're going to do this a little bit differently. I am going to share screen, but I am going to share PowerPoint. Share. There we go. So you guys get to see my actual desktop talking about privacy, right? All right. There we go. Lots of pictures. There. All right. So opinions on privacy. We've got the crypto nuts. We have the conspiracists. We have the nihilists, the exhibitionists, and the sage. And so every one of these has a different take on internet privacy, what it means. I guess you guys can figure out who you are in this list. But our goal for this presentation is to move you from the nihilist / exhibitionist to the conspiracist / crypto nut. So you guys know who this guy is? Snowden, Edward Snowden. So Snowden, he had a whole bunch of revelations back when the Washington Post picked up the existence of this NSA program called Upstream that collected a bunch of information along fiber optic cables. And these revelations were everywhere from US spies on Hong Kong and Chinese citizens to the NSA is playing online games and kind of everywhere in between. So Snowden kind of shone this light on what's happening in our world. Now, don't see what the big deal is, right? The NSA has been watching us for many, many years. Well, Bruce Schneier says, government and industry have betrayed the internet and us by subverting the internet at every level to make a vast, multi-layered, and robust surveillance platform. The NSA has undermined a fundamental social contract. The companies that build and manage our internet infrastructure, the companies that create and sell us our hardware and software, or the companies that host our data, we can no longer trust them to be ethical internet stewards. This is not the internet the world needs or the internet's creators envisioned. We need to take it back. Those are some very strong words from a guy very well known in our industry, right? Computer, crypto security expert, privacy specialist. Basically what he's saying is we can't trust these companies to know what's best for us. I like this quote a lot. This is from Thomas Jefferson. It says, a government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take everything you have. And that's really the whole reason why privacy is so important. So I ask the question, do you trust the government? Do you trust them to the government and the judicial system and believe that they only ever work in the public interest, right? I think the answer is no. Can you be sure that some individuals or groups can't arrange matters so that an innocent person can be made to look guilty? We read stories about this all the time, right? And can you recall an example of someone found guilty of terrible crimes being completely exonerated later because it turned out the original case was manipulated? I saw a picture just the other day on Reddit of some cop that was planting evidence, and he ended up, he finally went to jail because they found out they had done this for like, I don't know, 50 people, 100 people. He ruined every single one of those people's lives. So what if I have nothing to hide, right? This is the response that we get from a lot of people. You know, I don't do anything on the internet that people shouldn't be able to see, right? There's nothing nefarious going on there. Well, the government could subpoena whatever records they choose to claim for whatever reason at any point in the future. So while that nothing to hide may be nothing to hide today, abortion was legal not that long ago, who knows what kind of laws they're going to come up with in the near future, right? Could you retroactively claim that somebody had an abortion and therefore they committed a law? Who knows? They could use data already collected to construct cases against any individual, any group, or any type of person. And by focusing on some data and burying other relevant information, is it possible to create the image of an overwhelming case to prove any alleged perfidy? So back in 2017, and again, we're going to date this presentation a little bit, but still very much relevant. There was this "Give Us Your Passwords." It was an article from The Atlantic, and they cited two different things in there. First, they said the Council for American Islamic Relations filed complaints with DHS, Justice Department, and Customs and Border Protection, alleging that border agents had asked several Muslim American travelers to identify their social media accounts and turn over passwords to their mobile devices. Right? They had asked, just because they're Muslim, they said, hey, we need to know what your social media accounts are, and we need access to your mobile devices. Does that strike you as odd? Right? Why would those guys need that? And then just that month before, an Iranian-born British citizen and reporter for the BBC was asked to hand over his phone and password after he arrived at O'Hare. And he had an unliked device in hand. The border agent could then scroll through the contents of his social media apps like Facebook, Twitter, reading private posts and messages. Now, why did that border control person, why did they need to see that information? Back on March 28th, Congress actually overturned the internet privacy regulation. So the House of Representatives, along with the Senate, voted 215 to 205 to overturn a yet to take effect regulation that would have required our ISPs to get consumers permission before selling their data. The end result is those ISPs can sell your data and they don't need your permission, right? So the data on what websites you're visiting, your medical, financial, other information, this regulation will require them to ask your permission before selling that to advertisers and others. There is no opt-in. Congratulations, guys, your data is being sold. But then again, I've got nothing to hide, right? So I pose this to you. The image of a thing is often enough to convince the public of its truth, right? We see this all the time. All the newspaper articles, everything out there, they show you an image and they say this is true. So I give you a cow on the hood of a car, right? And a quote that says, "Remember, as days get colder, animals are attracted to the warmth of cars, so check your wheel arches or other hiding places." Right? Don't have to check your wheel arches for that guy. But this cow was copied and pasted from the internet, right? And it really isn't lying on the hood of the car, because if it was, you'd see the hood be crunched in and things like that. So picture may be worth 1,000 words, but you can't necessarily trust the pictures. And now with things like deepfakes, even if you see a video of somebody talking, it doesn't necessarily mean that they actually talked. These things are getting really crazy, really realistic. All right, so I'm going to skip over this. But Glenn Greenwald, who's one of the first people to help expose Snowden, Glenn Greenwald has an amazing TED Talk on why privacy matters. And there's a piece in there where he basically talks about the panopticon, this prison where you're basically being watched at all times. And the prison is actually set up, in fact, most prisons are set up, so that everywhere you go in the prison, there are eyes on you. Now I ask you, if you're in a location where everywhere you go and everything that you do is being monitored, do you do things a bit differently? Are there things that you would be afraid to say or to do in that situation? I'd probably say yes, right? You're going to act differently. So anonymity is the state or quality of being anonymous. Anonymous means lacking individuality, unique character or distinction. So we're basically saying, if I'm anonymous, you can't identify me from anybody else. Now, we're not talking about John Gabriel's greater internet dick blob theory that says if you take a normal person, give them anonymity and an audience, then they become a total dick blob. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is how to be online anonymously. And so the rest of this presentation is basically advice. It's steps that you can take to be anonymous online. And step one is get a good firewall. Now, we've all heard about firewalls, we probably have some at our house and things like that. But your IP address tells people where to find you. And your IP address is oftentimes public. It's something that's, when I hit a website, that information now goes into those logs, right? If I go and interact with a game or things like that, that information gets captured. If I'm on IRC, that information gets captured. And once somebody can find you, they can query your computer and get more information about you. So the firewall is basically that line of defense. It's the thing that stands between them and you and prevents them from making those requests. I don't know if it's a good free option anymore. I did go to their website and it looks like it's still around. I used to like something called Zone Alarm. It was pretty cool software, basically pop-up messages when somebody tried to connect to you and things like that. What's that? Defender? Windows Defender? No? All right. Griff says use Windows Defender. What if I'm on Mac? Do you have advice for Mac? All right. So Griff says Defender is coming from Mac, but it's shaky right now. Anything for Linux users? Same thing. All right. Good to know. Step 2, use a virtual private network. The whole idea of a VPN is that's going to reroute my traffic to a different location before it goes to its final destination. So from that IPs in logs standpoint that we talked about, it means that my IP is not my IP, or at least what gets logged is not my IP. It's the virtual private network. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. You can actually, I found a great article a while back that talked about how to use Amazon's free tier in order to create a VPN. Now, obviously, you can tie that back to the Amazon free tier server, and then that free tier server can be tied back to you using it at that point in time. But yeah, Kevin. Okay. I think what you're talking about is Umbrella. OpenDNS Umbrella. So OpenDNS is it Cloudflare? Okay. Okay. So Kevin says to arbitrarily type 1.1.1.1 into your browser, and you will be directed to an application that will help with VPN from Cloudflare. Now, whether that actually goes there or that's Kevin's honeypot, that's for you to find out. So the other nice thing about VPN is this is going to encrypt our data while making these transfers. The drawback here is that it's going to slow down our connection since data is now traveling further. So in some cases, our data may be routed to a point that's on the other side of the world before coming all the way back. Some things that you can use: private internet access and ForGuard, good options. They don't keep records and they protect you from government requests, or at least they have thus far. One thing to watch out for, though, is VPN split tunneling. So split tunneling is this idea that some of my traffic goes through the VPN and some does not. And this is something we see a lot on corporate VPN networks, where what ends up happening is your corporate data is still going to route through there. So when you're going to their email servers and things like that, but the other data, the stuff that you actually care about, is probably routing through some other location. All right, let me pull up my chat and see interesting comments. 1.1.1.1 is on Android App Store, Chrome extension. Cool. Good to know. Absolutely. All right. So step 3, use a proxy. So like VPN, the idea here is that we're routing our traffic to another location before it gets to its final destination, which also helps to mask our identity. The one thing to know about proxy is it's not going to natively encrypt traffic like a VPN would. It also can log your passwords. It can change website content. And again, it will also slow down your connection because data is traveling for that. So if all you're trying to do is not have other people spy on your requests, you can use one of these proxy servers and effectively hit another website randomly. There's a good list at proxyforfree.com. It organizes it by country, it organizes it by speed and things like that. Another kind of, I guess, side tip here is if you're ever trying to do one of those online polls or like vote for things and you want to vote multiple times, proxies are a great way to do that because most of them track you by IP address. Step 4, use Tor. Tor stands for the Onion Router, and it's basically software that tunnels your internet traffic through a series of relays. So now instead of going through one particular site, we're actually going to go through multiple different places. I think it does like at least 3 hops or something like that. It makes it extremely difficult to get any information about the users. And there's actually a browser that you can download called Tor Browser that lets you use Tor without having to actually install the Tor software. Again, if you're trying to vote in online polls, Tor Browser is a really easy way to do that because you can basically flip it on, cast your vote, tell it I want to switch my IP, cast your vote again, and rinse, repeat. Secure HTTP. I mean, we've been talking about this for years and years. This shouldn't be any surprise, especially for the folks in this room. But secure HTTP, HTTPS, is what tells us that our website traffic is encrypted with the SSL protocol, or more recently TLS. And that's what makes our traffic secure because it's encrypted, which means that any sort of man in the middle, anybody watching that wire, hello NSA, they are not able to read that traffic. There's also a browser extension called HTTPS Everywhere that enforces HTTPS wherever possible. And most websites these days are doing HTTPS by default. Yeah. Awesome. So HTTPS Everywhere has been depreciated by EFF is the feedback I'm getting now. Like I said, this is old talking. I just found out today. Yeah.
All the new browsers are coming off for HTTPS set by supposed to be set by default, but a lot of times they're not. You have to go into the browser and make sure that secure connections HTTPS is enabled. You have to go into your browser.
All right. So Kevin says that default browsers now are coming with HTTPS. Well, default, right? It's going to send you to HTTPS first, and then if HTTPS isn't available, it's going to send you back to HTTP. Is that what we're hearing? Yes. Okay.
Verify the settings within the browser to make sure that HTTPS is on by default.
Gotcha. All right. So verify in your browser that that setting is enabled. This is awesome, by the way. I like that that we're moving in a positive direction with respect to security. Okay, so step 6, delete tracking data regularly. Your browser is basically tracking where you go, it's tracking what you type, and it's tracking a bunch of other information about you. So your browser cache contains all this information. Your cookies contain all this information. And if you delete them, then you get rid of that tracking mechanism. So in pretty much every browser, there's going to be a clear cache button. You also want to make sure that you do the remove cookies for either this site or delete all cookies. Even better, a lot of these browsers, you can tell them to automatically do that when you first fire them up. And so you're kind of starting with a fresh session. Most of these browsers now have a privacy mode as well, where it won't maintain that state. So any of those kind of things can certainly help in terms of not being tracked via those cookies. Change your browser settings. So there's a ton of privacy and security settings that are in there that aren't enabled by default. And things where you can basically say, I don't want websites to track me. Don't put any cookies on my browser. Those are settings that you're going to want to set if you want to remain anonymous. There's this concept called a super cookie that basically an organization can drop a cookie on your system, and that cookie actually persists across multiple different websites. It can store information about you and things like that. So make sure you're deleting those cookies, and if you tell your browser not to store any cookies, or at least prompt you before it stores them, then you at least know that information that's coming back. All right, change your search engine. So Google, other search engines, they track what you search. They look at that information. They actually use that information in order to sell you ads and things like Other search engines, DuckDuckGo supposedly does not. Now, I think that there was a recent article or breach saying that they're essentially still doing that. They're just doing it a little bit differently because they all got to make money somehow. So I don't know if I can refer you to DuckDuckGo anywhere. I saw somebody's hand go up. Is that what you're going to say as well? Okay. Okay. So what Griff says is that's fine if you go to duckduckgo.com and you search from there. But if you use their browser, that's where the issues start to come in. And then AJ just popped into the chat, startpage.com. Lewis mentioned Brave browser. So I use Brave as well. Brave is a pretty decent browser, but it's designed for privacy in mind. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it as a search engine. I think it uses DuckDuckGo as the search engine. Yeah.
Brave browser, I found it by mistake. I think you could search. I don't know what I was doing, but if you type in the search function JavaScript, there's two settings where they're actually logging performance data, and you have to set them to off. I just found it by mistake.
So Kevin says that in Brave browser, there's a couple of settings where it's actually sending data back to them, tracking kind of your metrics and things like that. And you have to actually go in and disable it in order for that to be off. So it's enabled by default. Let's see here. Step 9, consider an OS change. So we know all about Patch Tuesday, Windows being notoriously insecure. Microsoft historically has been very willing to help out Big Brother. Anytime they get subpoenaed or things like that, they turn over those records. So there's other operating systems that are explicitly focused around anonymity, privacy, and security. Whonix was one. I'm not sure if it's still around, but Whonix was one that I found that focused on that. Tails, I'm almost positive, is still around. Tails is a live operating system that you can start from a DVD, from a USB, from an SD card, whatever. And the whole idea is that it is aimed at security and privacy and anonymity, and essentially none of the data gets saved. So every time you start that image, you're starting with a fresh version of that. There are no cookies, there's nothing like that, because there is no physical storage that's being updated. It's all based in memory. Tails also uses Tor underneath, so it's already got the onion router in there, and so it can certainly help with that kind of thing because no data is staying. Griff, you look confused. Okay, all right. All right, so in any case, if you ever have a complaint about the NSA, just send it to anyone anywhere. They'll be sure to read it for you. And that's kind of my segue into email security. So email, take precautions with your email. So by default, email is clear text. It goes over the wire, it's can be read and things like that. You need to make sure that you're using secure email services when you can. And when I say secure, I'm not talking about POP3 because that is clear text, right? If you can, use a dummy email address when you're emailing people you don't trust. Make sure that dummy email is not attached to any of your real information. Komodo, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to have free secure email certificates for signing and encrypting messages. I think they got rid of those, to be honest with you, because I think I used to recommend those for our guys at NI, and then about halfway through they stopped doing that. So I don't know if they have that anymore. You can certainly use something like PGP or GPG to do email encryption. Keybase is another really good one. It doesn't have native email, but keybase.io will give you the ability to kind of automatically create keys or upload keys. It gives you the ability to kind of associate them with social media account and validate that that account is associated with you. It gives you the ability to easily encrypt and decrypt messages. It's even got chat features and a crypto wallet. So keybase.io, I don't think I have any slides in here on that because it came out much more recently, but it's really, really good for being able to do the encryption of data prior to sending. Yeah. Step 11, use Bitcoin. This is getting harder and harder to tell people. Bitcoin is largely untraceable form of currency. And when we say untraceable, what we mean is that's not tied to a end user. However, with KYC, know your customer, it's really difficult to actually buy Bitcoin in an anonymous fashion. Yes, you can go downtown and you can be like, hey, I want to get money out of this Bitcoin ATM and whatever. But it's very difficult to do any Bitcoin transaction in a truly anonymous fashion. And what that means is that they can track those transactions. And because it's a public ledger, they can see every single one of those transactions. So there are other cryptocurrencies that expressly focus on the anonymity factor of this. But regardless, obtaining that cryptocurrency is going to be the hard part, because all these different exchanges, anytime you go into an exchange, they require that KYC. They require you to present identification. So if you have a friend that wants to sell you some Bitcoin anonymously, go do that. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't go that route. And then, of course, the other thing is who do I use that on, right? Not every website accepts it. For those that do, it could be a good way to help protect your identity when you're making purchases. I'm going to update this to cryptocurrency in general. Does anybody know the name of the cryptocurrency that is focused on true anonymity? Monero. Thank you, sir. That was a trivia question. Let's see. I wonder what the metaverse browsers break these measures. Meta is coming by EOY. For some dev teams, it's being used. I have no idea. It's a good question. All right. Prepaid Visa cards. So you can purchase prepaid Visa cards with cash from most of the major grocery stores, things like that. It can be used on any site that accepts Visa payments. So if you're looking for an easy way to essentially buy stuff anonymously, prepaid cards are certainly a good way to do that. So you can go to like CVS, buy that MasterCard, and then you can use it wherever you want. Yes, Griff. That's right. Make sure you wear your hacker hoodie when you go so that they don't identify you. Actually, you look for the teenagers hanging out front and you offer to buy them beer if they buy you prepaid Visa cards. That's how it goes. Yes, that's right. Gotta love those teenagers. So step 13, practice safe internet. Use secure passwords. I'm going to change this too, because this says use at least 8-character passwords. That's like advice from 10 years ago. This should be, in my opinion, it's 20 characters, right? 20 characters minimum. If you ask NIST, I think it's 12 is their minimum right now. But in any case, uppercase, lowercase, random stuff, no dictionary words. If you don't have it yet, use a password manager, something like a KeyPass. There's a bunch of online ones that I don't, when it comes to anonymity, I don't trust putting any of that stuff online. But in any case, secure passwords. And then I don't think I have this in here, is multi-factor authentication. So NIST officially had said that if you're using multi-factor authentication, you no longer have to do that password rotation every 90 days. It's also a great way to make sure that somebody can't just pop your password and start using it. Number 2 here is use different passwords for every site you have an account with. This is critical. We see so many password breaches out there that if you don't do this and one of your passwords get popped on one site, all of a sudden they're using it in a million other places. And I mean, I've gotten, I can't tell you how many emails from some hackers like, hey, I see you watching porn and I'm going to send these videos out to your entire email list, and here's your password as proof. And I'm like, well, I know how he got that password, right? It's from a data breach. Change your passwords frequently. Again, with multi-factor, you don't have to do it as frequently, but rotate them once a year or so is probably not a bad thing. Password managers is really the only way you're going to be able to get away with actually doing this, because if you have to have a unique password for every single different site that you have, most of us have lots and lots of sites that we're interacting with, and you're never going to remember them all. For the layman out there, usually what they end up doing is they put like the name of the site along with their password, and that's obviously not a very good approach, because as soon as I say, see Josh123 Hotmail or Gmail or whatever, I go, okay, well, it's Josh123 Facebook as well, right? Don't go to untrustworthy sites. Don't click on emails from unknown addresses. I hope we all know this by now, but yet people still get click on stuff all the time. Be wary of porn and file sharing sites. They have a history of being infected with malware. Same thing goes with any sort of wares. If you're doing, any sort of, Kazaa, torrents, any of that kind of stuff, a lot of that stuff is already infected. There's a great talk by Raphael Mudge a while back where he was talking about, so Raphael Mudge ran essentially a plugin for Metasploit. And basically this talk was all about if you were going to compromise a bunch of hackers, what he would do is he would put a backdoor into his application, and then he would basically upload that to some ware sites and let all those guys download that application. And then he walked through exactly how he would do it. So I think the end result was don't download software from the internet, because if you get it from me, I'm not going to do that. But if you download from the internet, who knows what you get. Yeah, so government is spying on us. All of our stuff is being exposed, which leads us to step 14. Stop putting your information out there, right? The whole idea that Facebook culture, Twitter culture has really made us really loose with our personal privacy. And so if you want to stay anonymous, you should stop putting so much information about yourself on the internet. I'm going to share kind of a personal story here since we have plenty of time. So I have 4 daughters. My daughters range from about 10 years old to my oldest, who's almost 15. And my almost 15-year-old, she did a lot of Roblox. She played a lot of Roblox, and we told her all the time, like, hey, don't talk to strangers, don't connect with people you don't know, things like that. Super smart kid, and of course she followed that advice, right? She didn't talk to strangers, didn't connect with people she didn't know. Well, what happened was one of her friends, who she knew in person, she grew up with her, was in kindergarten with her, one of her friends didn't heed that same advice. She met somebody online, she started to associate with this person, and then my daughter ended up associating with her through that connection. And they've had a relationship with this person for several years now, 2-3 years. They treated her like a friend. They had a group chat. They had conversations about, I don't know, whatever teenage girls talk about, boys they like, and things like that. They were close. It was almost like this was somebody that she knew personally. She had actually talked to her on voice chat, but she had never seen her face. So all of a sudden, this comes down, actually about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that, where somebody, this friend of my daughter, came across a picture, a video, and it had this other girl's name on it. But she went, that doesn't match the pictures that I've seen of you before. And so she confronted her on it. And her response was, yeah, those pictures aren't really me. I'm not really your age. They thought that she was 17. It turns out she's 22 years old. They still think that she's a girl. But her response was not to tell my daughter. She said, my daughter would be really disappointed if she found out that she wasn't actually 17, she was 22 years old. And I'm going, of course she would be disappointed, right? Finds out that this girl isn't who she said she was. So the end result of this is my daughter is upset. She's lost a relationship, something that she valued, something that she had for many years. But I think it's a valuable lesson. I think it's a valuable lesson for her, but I think it's a valuable lesson for all of us, because as parents, we are often teaching our kids the right thing. We're telling our kids, don't talk to these people, whatever. But I think that there's this idea of a web of trust out there. And I think that's the piece that gets lost in that advice. That if I trust you and you trust them, does that mean I trust them? Right? If I've never seen that person, if I've never, seen their face in real life, is that somebody that I can put faith in, that I can tell secrets to? I think the answer is no. I think that my daughter learned this lesson. Fortunately, she learned this lesson without major consequences. She lost a relationship, but the end result is she learned a valuable lesson, a life lesson. So I throw that out there because I know a lot of you guys do have kids, and a lot of you guys have probably shared this advice with them, but hopefully you guys can have that conversation with them as well. Griff, yeah. So Griff said the only reason he comes to OWASP is to make sure we're all real. I've delivered cookies to your house, Griff. I know where you live. So I leave you guys with the words of the police because I think they're very appropriate here. Sting once said, "Every step you make, every move you make, I'll be watching you." And I think that's very relevant today. So with that, my presentation is over, but we've had a great conversation so far. Clearly, there's stuff here that is no longer relevant. So do you guys have advice to share? You know, there's still people online, there's people in this room, got 20 minutes or so until you guys have to go back to work. What other advice do you guys have that I didn't put out there? Yeah, grab a mic. Give us a rep.
So I regularly overshare on Twitter, but I'm really careful about how I do it. So if I'm on vacation, I'll post the pictures when I'm back home safely. So I am taking, I'm cognizant of the risks, and so I'm taking sort of at least time sensitive actions.
I love that advice, Kate. So this is, I do the same thing. My wife hates me for it because she's like, you know, we're here in Hawaii. We should be sharing all the pictures with friends so that they can, you know, tell us where to go and what to do. And the reality is anytime you put that out there, my parents used to do this all the time. We're on a trip to Italy. Well, now everybody knows that they're not even in the country. If they want to rob them, if they want to whatever, that's a great time to do it, right? Break in their house. What other advice? Yeah, Renee.
So just, you said something really tapped in when you talk about that web of trust. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is when you are doing a contract with a vendor, somewhere in that contract, like it'll say that they'll protect your data all day long, but somewhere in that it'll say something like, and we have third parties that we'll share your data with. And there's this kind of thought that, oh, well, my contract's with you, of course you're going to protect my data to those third parties, and they don't. Like, they hand it over. And just one other thing on that is that, especially if it says we never sell your data, then that means that they have a partnership and they're basically giving it away. Right. So sometimes I'll throw that anyway, but that web of trust is a really good tie into exactly that in corporate, you know, contracts.
Yeah, that's great advice. And, you know, NIST 800-171 was supposed to help us with that as consumers. The whole idea was that NIST 800-171 basically said, if I have a vendor, then I have to make sure that my vendors follow the same policies that I follow. And so it had this trickle down effect. Now, you know, obviously it depends on the size of those people and things like that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, oftentimes as when we're doing business with other companies, we don't read the fine print. I mean, how many of you guys read the end user license agreement that you sign, you know, that says like, you know, Facebook owns your pictures, right? I upload that picture and now it's theirs. They can do whatever the hell they want with it. They want to throw that picture up on the, you know, Facebook homepage, they can do that. It's really scary. Other thoughts?
Do they actually own it, or have you granted them a non? Do they actually own it, or have you granted them a non-exclusive worldwide license?
So I guess I would say, I don't know if there's really a difference, right? Because if I have a license to do anything I want, wherever I want, whenever I want, do I really need to own that thing? That's fair. Yeah.
Okay, two things. So on the kind of physical and location data of out of your house, another place to be cautious with that is if you're using any kind of fitness tracker and uploading workouts. So if you have a Garmin, if you have an Apple Watch, if you have, if you're putting things on Strava, there's been very clear exploits of that usage information, you know, on places like military bases. And so be careful what you upload there and who you choose to share it with. And then For the password complexity, my company recently went away from the 90-day rotation policy and actually recommended using a passphrase. So that does put you back in the realm of dictionary words, but it gives you a long, complex thing that you can remember and don't write down on a sticky note and put on your keyboard or
Yeah.
else.
I'm torn about the whole passphrase thing, to be honest with you. I think that's great advice, and you got the whole like battery horse staple correct, XKCD cartoon around that. And it's true, it's random password or random words, random spacing, so you have special characters, things like that. The challenge is that most people go, oh, Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, right? And you're like, is that really any better than a dictionary word? Because I can create a list of all the songs and all the poems and things like that. And if you're using pieces from that, I can crack it the same way that I would, a normal dictionary password would. So I think that if you do it right, if you do the battery horse staple correct, you're probably good. Don't use that one. But if you take that approach, absolutely, I think that's good advice.
Hi, how's it going? My name's Noelle, by the way. This is my first meeting, so
Welcome.
thank you. Thanks. Two things. So one, this is probably obvious, but I don't have kids, but I have nieces, and I tell them all the time for any app, Snapchat, etc., the posting, turn off your location data, GPS, and then the other one is kind of to his point is the tracking. So I'm sure you guys know this, when you download apps and you agree to share location data, even though may not have your phone number or may not have your identity, there are plenty of companies, and I know them, and the government works with them, and they can track in exactly where you've been. But the positive is, if there is a kidnapping, they can track somebody's location.
You said something that I thought of too, which is that when you take a picture with your phone, there's a setting that you can have on your phone where it embeds the geolocation data into that picture. And there have actually been cases where somebody confronted somebody, went to their house, things like that, because they were able to find that information embedded into the picture. You also made me think of, anytime you install a new app on your phone, it's going to tell you, here's the permissions that your app needs. And we should all look at that list of permissions and go, ask, why does this thing need that permission? And I'll give you an example. Wilco used to have an app that was put out by the sheriff's department, and that app asked for geolocation data. And I was like, why the hell does an app from Wilco Police Department, Wilco Sheriff Department need my geolocation data? And I sent them an email, and they had a valid response. They basically said that you have essentially a 911 ability from the app, and they wanted to be able to track you when you use that data. So it kind of makes sense. But we should all be questioning why this app needs that permission. Why does it need to be able to use my camera? I don't know. Right? Kate?
So one time I got a photo from somebody and I didn't believe them. They were where they said they were. So I got this little app called Exif, and you basically pointed at the picture and it'll tell you all kinds of stuff about that picture. So that was a fun thing. It turned out I was right.
Yeah. By the way, for anybody who's here who's planning on going to LastCon, keep that, what Kate just said, in the back of your mind, because we're working on the capture the flag, and that just might find its way into the CTF. Spoiler alert. Anything
Anybody
else?
There's a question in the chat.
Chat question.
Is Yubico useful as physical MFA device? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so YubiKeys are awesome. They do a great job with that. So YubiKeys, for those who don't know, YubiKey is basically a small, looks like a flash drive essentially, but it basically has the ability to generate a random key for different websites, for things like that. And so it's really good if you're trying to do like a password for your KeyPass database, as an example. YubiKey would be a great thing to use for that because it's a strong password. It's something that you're going to be carrying around. Now, don't lose that YubiKey because then you're kind of screwed. But in general, I think UVs are great. I've got a bunch of them that I use for various purposes. Yeah, hardware fails, exactly, Kevin. It's a
But
good
where
idea.
do I plug it in on my phone?
Yeah, so there's a, you have USB C on there? There's a USB-C YubiKey. Yeah. Now, whether it'll work on your phone, I have no idea, but there is a USB-C one. There's one actually that has USB-C on one end and USB-A on the other end, so you can plop and do different stuff on it too. It's kind of cool. UV still have a whole bunch of this stuff. Anything else?
Anybody else?
Awesome. Nothing else on the chat. Cool. Well, thank you all for entertaining this today. I appreciate it. And hopefully you learned something.
Thank you.